Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So we are today on the 19th edition of this annual State of Parliamentary Democracy in India. We started this in 2006, and this is in the memory of our veteran parliamentarian Madhu Dandavte. And this also commemorates the 32nd anniversary of the Working Group on Alternative Strategies. We have a distinguished set of speakers today. There is Ajay, Gudavarthy, Associate Professor, Center for Political Studies, JNU. Sangeeta, Barooah, Pisharoty, National Affairs Editor, The Wire. Mahua, Moitra was to join us online, but there's from Nadia, she's in her constituency. But I believe there's an issue. We have kept the Zoom link open, but she has there's some connectivity issue in that remote area. So I don't know whether she'll be able to join. So that's it. And so we have to now do a ritual. We have to light a lamp of Madhu, and then we start. Madhu Dandavte was, of course, a great parliamentarian. I mean, the amount of time he would spend in the Parliament library, I think none of these guys presently do that. And the kind of research he used to do and the kind of biting criticism. I mean, he was in the government, he was in the opposition, so he had the taste of. But I think he's remembered most for, in the second class. It was third class that time. So cushioning with that foam, thin foam of 1.5 inches and gave such a, he's remembered for that. Otherwise, you have to sleep on that wooden kind of a bench. Okay. Yeah. So without further ado, I would request Ajay to open the meeting today.
So let me begin by thanking Suhas ji for this wonderful opportunity to share some of our thoughts on parliamentary democracy. Now, generally, when we talk about parliamentary democracy, we are expected to focus on the institutional dynamics of parliamentary functioning. Maybe Sangeeta would perhaps focus on that. What comes to our mind generally is in terms of focusing on issue of judiciary executive interrelations, misuse of investigative agencies, role of speaker, so on and so forth. I mean, that's the general focus one expects. But what I would do to avoid doing the expected is to say that parliamentary function, our institutional critique of parliamentary function has to also focus on two other interrelated dynamics. One is the social dynamics of social mobilization, what is happening on the ground in terms of social mobilization. Because when you're talking about parliament and democracy, there is the second part called democracy, which is about popular will. And popular will, the contours of the social character of that popular will then get reflected in the functioning of parliamentary institutions. And there is a third dimension, which is the economic policy dimension, which is the political economy dimension as to what is happening in the economy. So these are three interrelated dimensions in terms of economic policy, social dynamics of popular mobilization on the ground, which then have a certain impact on the institutional functioning. Generally, when we begin to discuss parliament, there is a somewhat an exclusive insular kind of a focus on institutions themselves, that institutions, parliament, don't meet regularly. Then we study the number of hours parliament is meeting. We study about parliamentary committees, what is happening with standing committees. While even as that focus is important, but it will be a misplaced critique to understand institutions without understanding where the consent in popular dynamics, popular will is coming from on the ground. So what I will do is to briefly open you to a recent survey I did by visiting Haryana, post the outcome, surprising electoral outcome in Haryana. We spent a couple of days talking to people on the ground to understand, given the general mood and popular understanding that it was some kind of a cakewalk for the Congress, how come BJP made a comeback? This is an important question I thought we should address. That will then explain what is happening at the top in terms of institutions. In terms of social dynamics, how there has been a sea change on the ground in terms of how people are perceiving popular politics. And one of the things I came across was when I was interviewing people from Dalit and OBC background. And I inquired that how come BJP made it back, because these were some of the social sections which voted for the BJP. And they said that what is wrong if they have attempted to contain the dominant ruling elite of the state? And they asked very pointed questions. They asked that who today has the privilege to protest for 2 years? Only those who have time and money. And many respondents reminded me that the farmers came prepared with air conditioners, they were running diesel generators, they were running langars, feeding people for 2 years. He said, who has this kind of money? If it is such a moneyed class, why should they sit on protest? So this should tell us something in terms of the kind of divide that has come, that what we felt sitting here in Delhi with a top-down view that farmers' movement was a progressive challenge to the Modi regime. that it was the first movement which was pushing the Modi regime on the back foot. It was a progressive protection of, against protest against corporatization of agriculture. But on the ground, common people felt this is a protest of the rich and the privileged. Similar was my finding about the Agniveer scheme. I thought that at least, if not the farmers' movement, Agniveer scheme is something that was meant for the lower end groups, for the EBCs and for the Dalits. I thought at least Agniveer scheme would have generated, and that is what we had all expected sitting in Delhi, that Agniveer scheme is something that would have generated a lot of angst, and therefore we thought there will be an N vote, voting, and block voting for Congress party. But even in Agniveer scheme, people who responded, they informed me that under BJP, a wider array of castes now get jobs under the scheme, and that too without corruption. So under the Congress, Agniveer employment, that is employment in the lower echelons of the armed forces, was permanent, but it belonged to few castes, and it was done, the employment was done through what they call karchi and parchi, through corruption. What BJP did is to open up that employment opportunities for the first time to not so well connected caste groups like the lower end OBCs. Most of them said we got jobs without corruption, without recommendation, but it's temporary. So the choice the government really posed was have permanent jobs for few selected elite caste groups like the Jats, or have temporary jobs without corruption, without recommendation to a larger array of poorly connected caste groups. So this is the second reason why even the Agniveer scheme did not generate the kind of anger, the kind of angst we thought in Delhi that this would create a popular resistance against the BJP government. So in the broader sense, therefore, what this comes across is that protest on the ground has become the weapon of the privileged, and pragmatic transactional negotiations is the privilege of the poor. And BJP is playing this now. That therefore, for left liberals, secular progressives in Delhi, protest looks like a legitimate form of resistance. But most caste groups, underprivileged groups, are being managed by saying that protest is a privilege of few groups. My third finding was most of my respondents suggested that service delivery, quality of service delivery improved under the BJP. He said police today responds to our call. They come immediately if we call. So the choice again was between an authoritarian service delivery implementation mechanism of the BJP versus a dysfunctional democracy of the Congress. Congress is democratic by default because it is dysfunctional, not because it is attached to the idea of democracy or democratization. So again, the poor, the underprivileged caste groups are stuck with a choice between authoritarian, better implementation of service delivery mechanisms versus a dysfunctional democratic inclusiveness of the Congress. And that's again perhaps the reason one could speculate that what looks to us from the top as authoritarianism, some would even go to the extent of calling it fascist and totalitarian. What looks from the top as authoritarian, perhaps from the bottom, it looks as being authoritative. That people think that under Modi, bureaucracy has become more responsive, more accountable, and perhaps that authoritarian image, that authoritarian control, translates into being authoritative. being decisive, between being strong, taking bold decisions, which I think also attracts a lot of admiration from subaltern castes. So I think given these changes, I think these are not small time changes. I think this is a large scale shift in the social turf of how social and political mobilization is happening post rise of Narendra Modi post 2014. Therefore, the dynamics, perception of what we are perceiving from the top is completely different and even in opposition to how the subaltern marginalized social groups are perceiving the same processes. One could raise a broad question that what accounts for this kind of a shift? Why has this change in perception come? To think of protest as that of a privilege, to shift authoritarian instead of being in the replacing authoritative form instead of an authoritarian form, so on, and pragmatic, transaction instead of a long-term vision, so on and so forth. I think for this we'll have to go back in history to 1990s, and I would draw the link to the neoliberal consensus that India went through in the 1990s. That today we have political parties which are very different, but the economic policy of all political parties, from left to right, have no difference. If you look at the economic policies on the ground, there is absolutely no difference that you can make between political parties. All of them follow the similar development model. All of them have similar kind of transactional welfareism. All of them offer similar kind of doles. All of them are unable to provide any stable employment, so on and so forth. So neoliberal consensus, I think to a large extent, explains the shift in the way people on the ground are thinking. That there is no difference between political parties, that they make absolutely no distinction, that it brings no distinction in terms of forms of governance, in terms of economic and social policy. It is more or less all the same. That is why you see, I feel that this partly will also explain why conventional issues that mattered in understanding nature of politics, idea of ethics in politics. Generally, we are fond of saying that values are disappearing from politics. Why should people bother about values in politics if it is making no difference to their, has no implication for their everyday living? Therefore, you see the idea of poaching. Now we are discussing Maharashtra election, where poaching has been, breaking up of parties is a big issue. And we are all still imagining that this breakup will have impact on Maharashtra politics. Sharad Pawar will have some sympathy. Uddhav Thackeray might have sympathy. My reading, and Rohan is here, was a journalist. He was on the ground. My reading of the situation would be that it will not matter to people on the ground, because poaching of electorates or legislators from one political party to another political party makes no difference, because no legislator has an independent social or political vision. And this is an ideal time to recollect this, since we are discussing this issue in remembrance of Mr. Madhu Dandavarthy, who was a socialist who had a distinct social vision, who had very little social support in the in terms of parliamentary presence, but his impact on social policy would be much larger. Today, how does it matter if an MP is in NCP, whether is in BJP, whether is in Shiv Sena, or whether is in the Congress? How does it matter to common people? So the institutional dysfunctionality that is being created in democracy, which is agitating many of us sitting here, makes absolutely no difference to the people, and there is a wholesome indifference on the basis of which BJP is playing its electoral game. Unless we don't understand the shift in the social dynamics, we will not be able to explain why this kind of BJP is able to get away with this kind of institutional dysfunctionality in the way they manage parliament, in the way they get away by dismissing parliamentarians, by suspending parliamentarians, by allowing no proper discussion in the parliament, by capturing media. I think 40 years back, this would have been a great electoral issue. I remember in Telangana, in then Andhra Pradesh, defection, when people broke away from Mr. NTR's there was a big defection. It was a big popular uproar against that defection. People took it, as we now think, as a big ethico-political issue, because there was a difference in policy format. That regional parties stood for agrarian welfareism, regional parties then stood for local welfare policies, local inclusive policies as against national parties. Therefore, TDP, people defecting away to Congress and other parties, people had objections. Today, what difference does it make if people from Congress leave to BJP or BJP's MPs join Shiv Sena? It makes absolutely no difference to people. And therefore, BJP has understood this logic that this will have no electoral outcome, or they can at least compensate this perception of institutional dysfunctionality or unethical horse trading can be easily be. That is why ruling parties are forced to keep on innovating this legitimacy crisis that is systemic in nature. They are able to redo by innovating new mechanisms. Look at BJP in Rajasthan. In most of the states, they are winning because they don't repeat the same candidates again. This is a new strategy which we are seeing in the last decade, that change CM candidate, what they did in Haryana. 1 year before Haryana elections, they removed Mr. Khattar as chief minister and bring in an OBC chief minister. You don't repeat 60% of your sitting MLAs and give new candidates tickets. So this is one of the strategies, and I can go on. There are n number of such strategies ruling elites are now devising to face this systemic legitimacy crisis in parliamentary democracy. Similarly, after Mr. Modi won in Gujarat in 2008, he tried to bring in a legislation of compulsory voting in local body elections in Gujarat. He brought in the category of defaulter voter. Of course, High Court thankfully struck it down, but the Gujarat government then argued that it should be a punishable offense not to vote. Instead of asking why people are not voting, you make it a criminal offense that people are not coming out to vote in big numbers. So, use of extraordinary laws, all these strategies I would see is the compensation mechanisms that the ruling elite in a systemic terms is using to offset this growing legitimacy crisis on the ground. How much time do you have? 7 minutes? Okay. And this, of course, this crisis of what we refer to as a parliamentary democratic crisis then gets covered. Look at the nature of psephology. Psephologists have reduced coverage of elections to a cricket match. That's one of the reasons perhaps people have stopped watching cricket, because psephologists are more entertaining than cricketers. What do psephologists tell you? If you sit at TV, they will tell you the average. You compare it, I can draw a complete simile between psephologists and cricketers, cricket commentary. They will begin by, cricket commentary would begin by pitch. Our psephologists will begin by an average. Who won this election 3 times? How much average? So by that average, who is likely to win? Strike rate. How much strike rate is there? Averages, numbers, entire electoral game has been reduced to a number game with no social analysis whatsoever. This is the impact the mediatization of electoral coverage has had on electoral process and parliamentary democratic functioning. So you can see, therefore, that crisis is appearing at many levels, that you have invisibilized the voter. People talk when Rajasthan elections were happening, psephologists were excited. They said last 30 years, Rajasthan is the only state which compulsorily alternates Congress, then BJP, then Congress, and then they got it right, they were excited. But they never paused for a minute to ask, why are voters so continuously, what is the discontent about? That they are compelled to change the incumbent government. What are the social issues on the ground? It is all reduced to a kind of a number game. This numerical number game is another way where I think the voter electoral behavior on the ground has been completely invisibilized. My last point would be in terms of the question of representation. That the only thing, therefore, that is left in parliamentary democracy to talk about social inclusion is nature of representation, which is what we are seeing with the agenda of 33% women's reservation and now caste census discourse. But again, we need to go back and raise this question that will representation make any difference to social and economic policy? You already have 100 parliamentarians, Dalit parliamentarians sitting in the parliament. What difference did they make to privatization of higher education in this country? What difference did they make when an incident like Hathras happened in Uttar Pradesh? None of the parliamentarians make any contribution, and they make absolutely no difference. So this change of social composition, I just came back from Rajasthan last 2 days as a follow-up to my Haryana, and I was asking people whether caste census will make any difference on the ground. People said, "Isme kya farak padega?" What difference will changing social composition? But there is still that notion of social justice. But having more backward caste MPs, this whole framework of politics of presence with a neoliberal economy, you are downgrading your budget allocations to education and health, and you will have more MPs from OBC and Dalit and women candidates. What difference will it make? Concrete policy terms. People have somewhere understood this equation that parliamentary functioning, parliamentary social composition makes absolutely no difference to the social policy and economic policy. And ruling elites are devising newer methods of insulating forms of governance. Therefore, you tell me, when was it the last time when we had an elected MP as a finance minister? It was Chidambaram, then was Manmohan Singh, then Pranab Mukherjee, now Nirmala Sitharaman. All your finance ministers come from the upper house, and they're not, because they know, ruling parties know that no finance minister can be re-elected. No finance minister can be re-elected. It's a foregone conclusion. Chidambaram will not be able to even get his deposit back. Of course, Chidambaram Sahib is now writing like a freshly minted.
They got re-elected.
That is the point. Precisely. Pre-80s, if you go back and look at the data, we had finance ministers from Lok Sabha. Post neoliberal reform 1990s, you have them only. It is now Mr. Chidambaram out of power is rising like a freshly minted human rights activist in Indian Express. If he had done even 25% of what he's writing then as a Congress Home Minister and Finance Minister, Congress wouldn't have seen this kind of a terminal decline. I'll stop here. Thank you.
I think Ajay has succeeded in, putting everything topsy-turvy for us. You see, now he says that parliamentary democracy is being insulated from the ground level by the Modis among us, and I mean, this is it's a very powerful statement you're making, that this guy we think has not, I mean, he's got political science. What is the degree he says? Across the board, he's done entire political science. And you're a PhD teaching in JNU. So he has the gumption, or he has he's making systemic changes. And without our realizing, parliamentary democracy is being given for a sixth. So anyway, so we'll come to that, and then you also make a very profound statement that protest is now a thing of the privileged.
Weapon of the privileged.
Yes, So these are, anyway, we'll talk about, I think there'll be a lot of questions and comments on this. So we'll go to Sangeeta now. And Sangeeta, by the way, has just got elected as the Vice President of the largest media body we have, the Press Club of India. So she's just become the Vice President. Go ahead.
Thank you. The oldest press club of India. and very few women. I think I'm the second. Can you imagine? In the over 50 years
The president
history.
will be the first woman.
Let's see. Okay. So anyway, now that Ajay has spoken so well, we can all go home now. Actually. Yeah. So thank you. It was like very, very good. And the social part is actually so important because when we are talking about Madhudandavati.
Yes, absolutely.
So that I think you chose a very good part. But nevertheless, I need to look at it's also important to look at the institutional part just to drive home certain other points,
Absolutely.
even to also highlight that there is indeed a kind of shift, a paradigm shift that we are seeing, in India's parliamentary democracy. And so obviously you spoke about the speaker, the institution of the office of the speaker. I think it's just something we need to begin with. We need to talk about like what we are seeing now. I wish Mahua was here. She, the kind of the role that the speaker played in her, suspension from the last Lok Sabha. And so this is something, we need a kind of a change now. I think more and more we are beginning to feel the need for a systemic change now. So that's there. And can you imagine it for the 17th Lok Sabha got over without a deputy speaker? This is the first time. I mean, what does the deputy speaker do? I mean, he is not any way lower to the rank of the speaker. I mean, if the speaker or the deputy speaker has to resign from their post, they have to do it to the legislature, which means that the speaker has to submit his resignation to a letter to the deputy speaker. So he is no less in it. So, but then, and normally that position goes to the opposition, and so that means you're this silencing the opposition in so many ways and in an institutionalized format. Like look at the suspension of so many MPs. This is another first we had seen. So the 17th Lok Sabha had actually seen a huge paradigm shift in terms of parliamentary democracy. And you were talking about like everyone is now talking about one nation, one election. You talked about how Gujarat was trying to bring in, the compulsory voting, and the father of our constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, was even opposed to one man, one vote. And I would like to quote him. Why was he opposed to this idea of one man, one vote based democracy in India? He had said that in politics, bhakti or hero worship is a sure road to degradation and eventual dictatorship. I'm not saying anything more than that. So I'm just generally saying that, this is what we are seeing. So he could see so many years ago something that we are seeing now. So that is what. And also this frequent adjournment of sessions that happens. Why does a frequent adjournment of sessions happen? Because you don't want to give that space to the opposition to question. They have not been just a flock that have entered, gate crashed into the parliament. They are also elected members. They are representative of a huge section of people. So but then that is denied to them because they don't belong to the ruling party. So this is something we are seeing more and more. These adjournments, it just also another thing is that we see is that the prime minister doesn't come to the parliament sessions. I mean, like, this is something really that is becoming more and more institutionalized in a way. क्या जरूरत है आने की उनको? So ये भी मतलब you are part of the parliament and you're not there. So that's something we have been seeing. And also the formation of these parliamentary committees and their functioning. These parliamentary committees have been playing an important role, but we don't see any of that now happening in the last couple of years. Big, it's always a kind of a farm line between the opposition and the ruling party, and nothing comes of it. It just ends as some sort of a kind of a match between the two. And you were talking about psephologists, who gets the more numbers here. I mean, like, do we have more number of people from the ruling party, so that you can shut the other voice down? So that kind of thing. We've been even also seeing how you're talking about judiciary. Look what has been done to the appointment procedure of the CJI. I mean, like, these kind of things are. Sorry, I'm talking about the election commission. It is a huge institution to carry forward this form of democracy, but now it is the executive that is going to, the party in power is going to actually decide who's going to be the election commissioner. So those kind of things are happening. And uh, so here I want to also highlight, like, I come from media, and media is also helping this in paradigm shift, this shift. I mean, they have more questions for the opposition than to the government of the day. So here we are talking on, in memory of Madhu Dandavati. He might have been in the government, for in different ministries, but he's remembered as an opposition leader. So that's what. I was thinking about my country cousin Arnab Goswami. I come from Assam. His grandfather was a left leader, and he is like um, he never became a minister or anything, obviously, because he came from that party. But he would always be remembered as an opposition leader who people would wait to hear him, what he had to say about a certain policy or a bill. And that was a time when everybody came together to make him the leader of the opposition because they felt that that voice is required. So that is the kind of legacy we all have, and even in various other states, I'm sure. So those things are there. And the other thing, I mean, like, Madhu Dandavate had played a role in bringing the anti-defection law. So for certain reasons, but now we are beginning to see like that those laws, those violation of the 10th schedule and all that. It's like it's no more for the purpose that was brought in, for to stop horse trading. It is not now. Everything else is stopped, but horse trading is going on. It's like and in the process, what it has done is that it had discouraged MPs from getting into interesting debates. So because there will be a whip, and so you have to all fall in line. So there's no interesting discussion. We have to only look at everybody from the party angle. So you have to stand for the party. So this is something which is, I find it like quite, it's like it's no more interesting to watch parliamentary debates. You don't know who's going to get up and and talk about, and you also mentioned about, you said about people Dandavati used to read up, so that research and all that is nearly gone. So, and that's another thing that another MP from my state only, who was Congress's chief whip, the Rajya Sabha Bhubaneswar Kalita, he just suddenly moved to the BJP. He issued a whip and ran away to the other side. So that was that all these things are also happening. So this is basically hammering on the institution of parliamentary democracy. And when we are talking about all of these instances, and there's so many more other things are happening, even in the assemblies, also various assemblies. Deputy speakers were not, I think, elected even in various state assemblies. A lot of BJP ruled states, Uttarakhand, Rajasthan, and all that, in 2023 and all that, they were not there. So that is what is also happening. And so, but why am I talking about things that you all know? So my whole point is that this shift looks to me as a kind of a kind of a permanent shift. from the parliamentary democracy to perhaps this, we'll say executive democracy. It's like the cabinet telling you that, you shut up, we will run, you are here, you don't have the numbers, so you don't have the voice. So we never thought that if you're in the opposition, you also have a voice. But that voice is perhaps is like very clearly being silenced, and we are seeing this shift. And to my mind, I'm wearing this badge, which is the photo of the old parliament. For me, like, this shift is so, the new building that we have is so symbolic of this shift that we are seeing, I would say, because we still have a secular constitution, and we saw how the Sengal was being placed, but the president was not even invited. It was supposed to actually open a session. So we are seeing this whole thing. This is like, I look at it as a kind of a symbol that is of new India, and which is perhaps, kind of eroding of the parliamentary the space for eroding of the parliamentary democracy. So, and like what Ajay said is also, I fully agree that, the caste and class has been playing a role in everything, including in our what we are, this kind of strategizing that is happening. And also, when you see that so much of all these violations are happening, and people are not responding the way they should have, or they would have, say, so many years ago. Let's not forget when Indira Gandhi was disqualified for, one official using her government vehicle. So, like, think of it today. I mean, like, it's just only a matter of few years. We're seeing that change. Who cares now? Nobody is actually bothered to find out whether an official, is being used for party work. I think there'll be hundreds and thousands now. So though that ship has sailed. So that's so something that you have actually looked into, this whole that social part, but I would argue that the social part is, of course, the whole disillusionment with the entire system in place. But perhaps the ruling party is also trying to utilize this disillusionment to take to I mean, like, move parliamentary democracy to perhaps executive democracy. I would argue for that. And if there are more questions after that, I'll take. Yeah. Thank you.
Also, I think you should talk about how architecturally, structurally, they are changing. I mean, the central hall has disappeared.
Central hall
and
has
the
disappeared.
media
Yes.
is now boxed.
Media
You
is
can't
boxed.
interact with the members. You can't.
There's
Just
nothing.
talk about that.
Yeah. So that's of course a big thing. I mean, like, I work for the Wire, and this was like Parliament was one space where we would all go meet. You could just so easily meet MPs, not just have access. So those things are gone forever. It's like the other day somebody was asking me, you've not applied for your accreditation. I said, what for? She said, oh, it is because everything is online. I said, no, online is good, but then now we allowed to get in. Binay, former Secretary General of Press Club, is sitting here. How all they fought, for accreditation of the renewal of accreditation of the journalists. That's not happening. Okay, so. And it's now basically technology is also being used to help that, because you will have these media organizations called ANI, which will the first all the bites will be given to the chief minister to them by the chief ministers and the prime minister's office, all ministers, central ministers, and then they disseminate. I have a history of working with news agencies. We thought that we were the ones who were breaking news, you and I, PTI, and all of that. And that's over now, and there's like a private entity that is actually breaking news. And then we all go getting into Twitter thinking, oh, we got it first. So that is also that's happening. And One thing that's slightly differ from you, Ajay, is like I come from the Northeast, so we have a lot of these smaller communities. We do not forget sending an MP to Parliament. They can't even send an MLA to the local to the state assemblies. So for them, sending an MP is still a huge thing. Yes, they will do anything to so that's still I think when India is so large that there's perhaps one thing is not applicable everywhere, somewhere in different shades it works. Yeah, thank you. If there are any questions, I'd like to answer.
No, I think what is coming out of these two presentations is there is basically a kind of a move to wreck the system from within, you know. So you wreck it so much that, the thing is virtually being decimated, you know. So you talk of, I mean, yours has been a contrarian kind of a projection, Ajay. But you see, what about I mean, we talk of Haryana specifically. What about that issue of those women wrestlers? Now that made some kind of a thing, or you think you never even talked about it in your survey? Yeah, why don't you tell us about that?
So I did talk about it, and that's also very intriguing. Most of my respondents knew the intricate details of everything else: who is the candidate, who is getting how much money, what is being transferred where. But the moment I asked them about women's reservoir, most of them feigned ignorance. Said, "ऐसा है क्या? कब हुआ? हमें तो पता नहीं. अगर हुआ हो तो गलत है." So very, very strange. So I think the gender still remains a moral, ethical issue. And people, and my own reading, again, as Suhas says, it's a contrarian reading, is that I think the wrestlers issue is a played up issue by the ruling regime. They wanted that issue to continue on the media to generate that anti-Jat, anti-dominant community narrative on the ground. The people, in a way, in a very oblivious and oblique way, are rejoicing the attack on they are reading it as an upfront challenge to the dominant community. They are not reading it as a gender or an issue of sexual violence. And that's why even that, I would say, has a certain kind of a very, a certain kind of potential to generate a consent rather than anger. We would think that it is a gender issue and therefore it will anger people. But people are seeing it as an upfront attack on the Jat communities. And because routinely, Dalit and OBC women are ill-treated in small places. Sexual harassment is a very regular feature with them. This is for the first time they are seeing a digital, televised violation of upper caste women. So the way people would perceive, what I could gather reading between the lines, because they were feigning ignorance, but I got a sense that there is somewhere a silent rejoice. And this is a standard technique that BJP is applying state after state. Gujarat, it is against Rajputs. Maharashtra is against Marathas. Haryana, it is against Jats, but with conservative value. This reminds me of William Rex books, Mass Psychology of Fascism, where he says fascists build a totalitarian regime is a combination of rebellious emotions and conservative ideas, which is what I think I got to see in Haryana with Wrestlers issue. That they support, they're bringing in a conservative sense of obliquely justifying sexual misconduct with women. Ideally, we would have thought people should have been repelled with that kind of an attitude. But people told me, including Jats who voted for BJP, told me that if that was true, if this lady had been misbehaved, why did she not complain immediately? Why is she coming after 3 years? Ye to sab khel hai Congress ka. So there is a conspiratorial narrative being read into everything. People are not willing to read it on face value. So the anti-systemic sensibility is being subverted or perverted by the ruling regime into these kinds of counter narratives, which is I feel very dangerous in the long run.
No, Ajay, I would just sorry, can I
Yeah.
add a little? So you know what I see is also quite what you pointed out is something very interesting because BJP so far we have been seeing this whole going with the majority, the big player,
Yes.
okay, in any state or anything, you know. If you talk about say Gujarati Ashmita, it's actually Hindu Ashmita. You talk about Marathi Manush, what you know. In Assam they're adding this Joy Aaya Home Jai Shri Ram, you know. So it's like the majority community, you know. Then now what you are seeing is like in Haryana we are seeing this complete overhauling of that thing that they would do with the majority. They would go with the majority, you know. So this is something a bit. That's why I would say this Haryana election. While I agree with you, is actually quite a shift. That this shift has to be, yeah. I mean, like this is
seriously.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, before we open up, I mean, we have some time. Taking advantage of. Both of you have, been in your own different ways critical, but you're not suggesting what should be done to make a difference. Now, I would suggest in the next 5 minutes, both of you, I mean, it's easy to criticize, but what is the alternative we put forward? And I don't believe in the Tina factor, So you must tell us how do we go about it? You're very critical. I mean, Agniveer is out. Then your farm education is out. You're just kind of blanking it off, And then you talk of the census thing being out. So what is left then? I mean, we just have to trudge along and, say, become bhaktas or what is your thing? I mean, before I come to Sangeeta, just tell us.
If I knew that, I would be contesting elections, not sitting next to you here. Well, so I think the alternative is really for social democratic parties to have a shift in their social policy. The problem with parties like Congress and left, why they are facing this kind of a terminal decline, is that on the social front, you're talking about secularism and an inclusive agenda, and an economic front, you're talking about animal spirits, competition, and ruthless capital accumulation. This is a complete a tragedy, devastating tragedy in terms of everyday social life. That is precisely the reason why people feel this is appeasement. They will not be willing to accommodate with that kind of generosity if you do not have a strong, robust social welfare policy. So the alternative really is not just talking about parliamentary dysfunctionality. All of this will matter if your social policy matters. So why should Congress look at this? 10 years opposition is on terminal decline. There is no, in the near future, one is not seeing any revival of Congress or even left parties, but none of them talk about a transformative social policy. What prevents Congress from saying we will allocate 9% of our budget and bring in common school, public school systems for education for all? What prevents Congress from saying 7%? We are a developing country. We are allocating 1.9% to health, less than Bangladesh. And then, of course, we complain about immigrants coming from Bangladesh. That's a different matter. But less than Bangladesh, our health system is. What prevents? Congress is struggling. But why doesn't Congress, Rahul Gandhi is talking about caste census, talking about Nyay, all that. Why doesn't this 7% of budget will be on health, primary health care for all? And a basic income guarantee scheme. I would suggest these are the three schemes that will completely alter the direction of social policy, which will create a new mood on the ground. Without promising anything substantive to people, you're simply tinkering and saying this is fascism, this is regressive, this parliament collapse ho raha hai. People are indifferent, and people are imagining BJP is converting systemic crisis into collapsing of the system. They're using the systemic, anti-systemic anger against the institutions because people have anger against these institutions. So they are leaving it to wholesome collapse of those institutions. So without bringing in a new hope, even today, left parties and Congress, left of center parties should bring in a social democratic vision. That you said will take care of income, because these are the three sources of anxiety. Look at the source of anxiety for migration. People migrate because there is no good schooling and no healthcare in most of the small towns and small places. What prevents the state from not shifting that discourse? Rahul Gandhi is questioning monopoly capitalism, but he's not questioning the social democratic character of the capital. You are continuing with the same social character. And people have understood this. So you can bring in representation, you can bring in more participatory parliament, but as long none of them have any impact on your social policy, what difference would it make to common people? And why would we hold them responsible if they are so indifferent? And they are rejoicing this kind of, Akhil Bilgrami, a political philosopher, makes an interesting point. He says that in a game of chess, if any which rule I'm going to end up losing, I know I will only choice I have is upturning the board of game of chess, which is what the people are doing today. And Mr. Modi is a representative of that kind of a disruptive, rebellion, disruptive, regressive kind of rebellious emotion that he has captured. He is also somebody who comes from, a very weak background. Even in Rajasthan, when I went recent visit, people are continuously making this, but Congress has dynasty rule. Year after year, they have generation after generation. BJP gives chance to outsiders. So all this kind of symbolism, anti-systemic symbolism is mattering for people, which is vacuous. Finally, it is not going to make, even this regime will make no difference. But they are mobilizing that disruptive anger on the ground. If you want to make a difference to that anger, you have to promise something much, much better. Then you will see there is a definitive shift on the ground. Sangeeta?
Completely agree with you. Why do you think otherwise BJP is going after the AAP leaders? They're working for health and education. I mean, which is actually quite a peanut, I mean, like in terms of their whole expanse and all of that. But you are going after it only because they fear this. This is where they are hammering on and making a difference. So I completely agree with it. But also, I mean, look at the numbers that the BJP got this time. Oh, how would you describe them? There are a lot of theories, but I would also say it is anti-incumbency. So that also can play a role. And but the other thing, one of the factors what we saw in the 2024 elections was also the fear of the change of the constitution. Lot of people that you're talking about from the lowest strata, social strata, they were scared of that the constitution is going to be changed, and not for nothing that the prime minister had to enter, make that show of bowing before the constitution after he formed the government. So there is that fear of the of that losing our constitution. So somewhere we still have hope, and so if we can talk about, and another thing is the economy, the economy plays a big factor still in the formation of a government or in the breakdown of a government. So this government has not been able to give us a strong economy. So that somewhere is also, for how long can you then, keep devising these newer strategies to divert people from the failing economy? Because failing economy also means rise of inflation, right, price rise and unemployment. On these issues, when you go down to the ground, it's all staring at you. And so you do need then these newer strategies to keep diverting people. But for how long? It's like it's been now 10 years. So this is perhaps the time, what you saying that the opposition should be coming up with these newer ways of looking at crucial areas like education, health, and also economy. There's something, you need to discuss now this, because remember, we have all seen those photographs of Nirmala Sitaraman visiting Manmohan Singh, and so these kind of discussions, I think, that how is actually, it is time to start talking that if we come to power, if any opposition party comes to power, this is what we will go to do to make the economy better. You need to spell this out. I feel now talking, spelling it out is actually will make a lot of difference. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
But the tragedy is Congress again made Mr. Chidambaram the manifesto chairman.
Someone we must thank for bringing in UAPA, you see.
Well,
Well, I have a few observations. One of the observations is that,
Your name, sir?
beg pardon?
Just mention your name, sir.
My name is G.D. Sharma,
Okay.
former professor of NEPA. And I have a few observations. First observation is democracy depends on how you are committed to democracy, otherwise it doesn't depend. That's the first and foremost. What changes came during the 90s was basically shift from a democracy, you might call it dysfunctional, you might, but that was a historical reason they have to be democratic. But the three persons who came from IMF, Manmohan Singh, Montek Ahluwalia, and Chidambaram, they all represented IMF policy and framework. And that shifted the Congress policy, economic policy. And therefore, difference between the Congress and BJP started blurring, and within 10 years, it blurred fully. But now difference is becoming hyper liberalization versus liberalization. This is becoming an issue. Second is that, as I rightly say, fear of constitution is coming because authoritarian rule is influencing it. But unless, I fully agree, unless you take a specific course of economic policy change, this car census will make inside little difference, but it's not going to make difference. And what is withholding, I feel, Congress, is the same typo around that. It's still working. And that has not come out of that typo, which I say, Chidambaram, Manmohan Singh, and this. And that has not yet come out. Unless he takes a specific policy of social mobilization on the term of economic policy, which was the characteristic of Nehru, Indira, and that ended at 1990. So you can see a future only specific focus statement on the economic and social mobilization policy takes. Fear will help getting 100 MPs or 200 MPs, etc. Secondly, your observation that in spite of people coming from OBC, etc., why there is no fraud about the privatization of higher education, school education. Fact of matter, 100 of them are sponsored by the what I call corporate entry into the political process. I said in 2014, now corporates are going to enter into the Indian body politics, which was not that clear before that. In 2014, corporate entered into, I told one of my friends who were traveling together that it's going to enter into politics. And 2014, 2000, it has completely entered into this. So 100 MPs are sponsored by the private people. How can they speak about the against? Even Tharoor, I told once that all along we were talking of public university, now you're talking of privatization. I said, we all got free education, you want poor people to pay. So still they are not able to coming out of, coming out of this cycles of TRICO and IMF. And IMF now is away, and I often say, it's a global capitalism is getting into India in a short period of time. Adani, Ambani are a temporary phenomena in this country. The platform capitalism has already entered, where the boundaries of the sovereignties are already finished. It is going to be next 5 years. If it is not checked, present regime, you are going to enter into global capitalism shortly. 3 small laws was a reflection of the global capitalism. It was nothing. I stop here, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Just two straight questions, and I'm Anand. One, of course, you mentioned very interesting interventions, of course, and presentations. What you said about making the opposition irrelevant, isn't it true for the ruling party itself, for the members of the ruling party as parliamentarians? That's the first question. I mean, perhaps it applies equally so because each one is replaced, fully replaceable. Second is that there is another instrument that seems to be there, which is the disintermediation in terms of delivery of social sector schemes. Earlier, it would be centered through a very elaborate machinery. Now it's through a direct benefit transfer, which cuts out the entire role of, however inefficient it might have been, the role of the bureaucracy, the role of the local politicians. Now it's bags are delivered photographs. Okay, so that sort of makes the entire system, rest of the system, it's what I call as disintermediation in delivery. These have played a very important role. I thought maybe you would like to just react to that. Thank you.
Okay, right. Once it was mentioned that there has been no. Yeah, I'm Pradeep Gupta. I was OSD to Mr. Pranab Mukherjee for long years in 14th and 15th Lok Sabha. He was elected from Lok Sabha when last he was the finance minister. And I had dealt with him in the finance ministry also. So he was the last, I think, in this particular century, the last finance minister who was from the Lok Sabha. And he gave due importance to that feeling. The 2009 as well as 2011, 10, 12 budgets we did. And another thing, just small observation, what I learned with him that there are some invisible red lines or maybe visible red line, whatever it is. The current government is ignoring that or deliberately violating those red lines. Those red lines are set by the parliamentarians themselves that will not do this, will not let loose the agencies. I have seen so many things, but then those are in their own mind and their heart. So how much you will, so they are basically divines, but that's all what I can say.
Thank you. I am A.K. Bhattacharya. I am a retired bureaucrat. Sangeeta's flagging the issue of use of officers for political privileges reminded me an interesting incident long back. You know, around 35 years back, in one of the Parliament MP election, I was in charge in the first posting of my district head. I was in charge of the counting. So after post lunch of the counting, the collector came to me and advised me to convert all the invalid votes to the Congress. And I looked at her. I said, "Are you sure?" So then she explained, "How can I do it?" I said, "Thank you. It cannot be done." So what I wanted to bring home is the use of bureaucracy, the administration, government officers had existed long back also. Probably the volume has increased. Volume has increased. And what I find a change, which is very alarming and it hurts me, that the officers are, large number of officers are yielding, succumbing largely. Probably that is increasing. So my question to Sangeeta will be, do you find a disruption of the bureaucratic system, the bureaucracy, and how do you see the role of bureaucracy in the whole democratic system? Because to me, I blame the bureaucracy, the officers, more than the politicians. Politicians are bound to, they should, or they may or they should adopt these means, but the bureaucrats or the officers, they are committed. They are committed to the sustainability of the whole system, the whole democratic system and whole bureaucracy and the whole constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Varghese. I used to be the Vice Chancellor of the National University in Delhi. Thank you very much for the good presentations. First point that I like to make is, Ajay, it becomes too stretched when you say that social composition of the parliamentarians are made no change in the social policy. I think that is not it's a very, I mean, one can be critical, but this seems to be bordering with a more pessimistic way of looking at the whole issue of parliamentary democracy. Second, the futuristic orientation that you are mentioning about the economic policies and social policies. I think I'm not a congressman. I do not belong to any political parties. But if you look at 2019 elections, Congress had one of the best manifestos in terms of the basic income, in terms of the farm crisis, and in terms of the increasing unemployment. These are the crucial issues. But they got the lowest number of seats. So there is something that, it is not only the question of raising these issues that is important, but also these are real issues, everybody agreed, but these are not the issues on which people voted for. The third dimension that I would like to highlight is that your presentation gives the feeling that Parliament is discussing something which is not related to the poor. That is also bordering with a little pessimism. So my point is that I enjoy criticism. I enjoy looking at critically, but when it comes to crossing the border from criticism to pessimism, that I do not know how far it is. Thank you.
Begin the,
Question?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, of course. I mean, if the entire system is affected, the bureaucracy is also affected. But yeah, the role of bureaucracy is so important. We all, I mean, like, look at the Rafale deal stories, the Hindu. They just took it out from the file notings of the bureaucrats that helped us to show what has happened, who were present. So those file notings are very important. So that's done by the bureaucrats. And I would myself, I have seen in my state, Assam, when I filed his RTIs, against the chief minister who's all over the place now. And but it's the bureaucrats who are giving the replies. But while in states, smaller states like, say, Manipur and all, you don't get even replies. They send you a reply like that you have ulterior motive. That's why you're asking these questions. You know all the answers. These kind of things are happening. But so who's doing this? It's the bureaucrat that's doing it. It's taking orders, of course, and not following the rule, the law. But so it's incumbent on the bureaucrats to do that. And but of course, let's not forget also, so many bureaucrats, have gone to the so-called the Kalapani, for having taken on the government of the day. That let's not get that also. But it's an easy way out. I mean, look at, if you can do this and you are getting an immediate kind of a prize for doing things. We are seeing it more and more now. So shamelessly that is happening in the last couple of years, say 7-8 years. We've been seeing this, that if someone does something, even in bureaucracy, let's not forget Justice Ranjan Gogoi. He's a Rajya Sabha member from a Chief Justice. Have we seen this kind of a thing happening before? And his brother, who was in the army, became the Northeastern Council member for the first time. An army man has become, thanks to Justice Gogoi, willing to relent to the ruling regime. So these kind of things we're seeing even in judiciary. Why talk only about bureaucracy? Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. So very briefly, I'll begin in the reverse order to that provocative comment on pessimism, but you'll have to back it up with facts. It's not a question of show me evidence where social composition has made difference to social policy. I'm asking direct question. Samajwadi Party, it's socialist-backed OBCs. Are they fighting against privatization of education? Mayawati, Dalit Party. Is there a single occasion where they have come out on streets and protested what is happening to institutions, public universities today? Show me evidence. Show me one evidence where a Dalit or an OBC MP stood in parliament and has attacked privatization of higher education or budgetary allocations on health and primary education.
So there are answers to the questions that you're asking. This 27% OBC quota would not have come if there was no change in the social composition of the parliamentarians in the country. There are
no, that's a different. You're talking about, again, you're talking about social composition. I'm all for it. You can include more Dalits. You can have even 33% women reservation. It is not an opposition to that. But I'm saying that if you do not link it to social policy, then one cannot grudge that BJP can offer. BJP, by your argument, BJP is the most radically transformative party today. No, please listen. I'm saying by your logic of social composition, BJP is the most diverse party today, more than Congress. BJP is a party who have made Dalit, OBC, Yadavs, STs presidents, prime ministers. Look at all constitutional position BJP is offering to the subaltern caste. But on the social economic front, they are ruthlessly pushing monopoly capitalism. So representation is important. Social composition, I agree, will be, but you cannot afford to argue about question of representation independent of your social policy. And that's why BJP can today appropriate that agenda of social composition, can appropriate even Ambedkar. It will make no difference. They can be monopoly capitalists as well as revolutionary party on the ground. People don't see this contradiction. So I'm saying, unless that will depend on what is the social content of the social policy of the opposition parties. If they have a transformative social policy agenda, people will begin to then reject. That is the question. So that's also one of the reasons I would say why there is not much of excitement on the ground on caste census. On caste census, including among OBCs, there is hardly any excitement. How far caste census is a question that can really stall Hindutva politics, I have my serious doubts. Okay. A lot of questions, this in terms of, I think somebody asked in terms of welfare policies. So I'll just kind of combine, because there are a lot of them. See, even that bit of welfareism that Congress party did along with neoliberalism since 1990s, they did not do it either through its party, they did it through NAC, which is an extra institutional body. So the welfareism that Congress implemented never went through their own cadre. Never, party did not become symbol of welfareism. Party became symbol of what I call Manmohan Montek Mansikta. Sabko becho, sab privatize karo, global capital pay. So even Congress cadre did not know on the ground the value of welfare policies like MNREG. Today, in contrast, BJP is implementing all its welfare policies through its cadre. Its cadre implements and distributes those welfare policies. And a lot is happening on the ground. I don't have time to get. So this is the difference. That why did Congress not defend itself as a social democratic party, even if they wanted to open up the market? So they clearly identified ideologically with one pole, and that's the reason why they have been disseminated and brought to 44 seats. That's I think that link is very, very clear. And today, even when Congress is coming up with what I would call transactional minimalist welfareism in the South, like Karnataka and Telangana, 5 promises, I would say it's peanuts. Giving bus passes, giving 1,000 rupees to women. I mean, this is completely demeaning and undignifying of the citizenship project. People are responding positively. People have voted back Congress in Karnataka and Telangana, even with basic promise. But one has to realize that these are the promises even BJP can implement. That's why when they said in their manifesto internship program, Modi is already implementing internship program. He's already saying the 10 lakh jobs, 1 lakh jobs I will give. So why should people not vote for Mr. Modi for the same kind of policy framework? And so in terms of this question of unrest against agencies, the systemic logic, even that people are not responding. 30 years back, misuse of agencies was an issue for people because it was also about translated into issue between center and state. States represented regional capital and agrarian interests. So when center would push investigative agencies on state leadership, it was also seen as an attack on regional capital and on agrarian interest. Today, that's not the case. You have already destroyed that. And with GST, already there is centralization of funds. How does it matter if your investigative agencies are attacking your regional leaders? So I think there are these oblique linkages one has to see why electorate is behaving the way it is behaving. And this is not an India-centric thing. This is a global phenomenon. Look at the way Trump came back. If you go strictly by economic analysis, Biden did reasonably well in containing inflation, generating employment, and in terms of his foreign policy. But people returned back Trump in a very, very, very big way. Unprecedented majority. So that is because people know that there is no basic social democracy. There's nothing basic they are going to lose. People have voted even in Arab majority areas in United States, even Muslims have voted for Trump. Forget others. This kind of a disruptive electoral behavior has to be explained because of policy choicelessness. You have brought in such heavy-handed neoliberal consensus which has lost its hegemony, but there is no alternative. Even parties that are struggling are today not willing to say. We'll have to think the other way around, that why Congress, which is facing such a terminal decline with no revival in sight, does not want to still push a long-term social democratic policies, but brings back Mr. Chidambaram as the manifesto committee. That says a lot about what Congress is going to do. And people know that as long as they don't think there's an alternative, I am with people for not voting. Why should they vote? That is a question we should ask. Why should they vote back Congress? I mean, liberal democrats, we sitting here can say it's an institutional crisis, totalitarian fascism. People say it makes no difference. It makes absolutely no difference who is on the ground. That basic subsistence minimum BJP is already offering, and dare I say, offering with a greater bureaucratic implementation efficiency than what it would happen under Congress.
Yeah, we're going to the second round now. Yeah, go ahead. Just one second.
My name is,
No, that's okay.
my name is George.
Yeah.
It's an outlandish suggestion, but are all political parties deliberately or inadvertently moving towards the same phase, probably hunting as a pack and people are the hunted?
Okay, fine, thank you. Vinay, come here.
Sangeeta talked about new parliament building, and you wanted to know about the central hall system which we had in the old parliament system. So I was a privileged central hall card holder, which you get after covering parliament for a few decades, non-stop. And there is a quota that how many central hall passes will be given to how many senior journalists. So the system was in the old parliament building, which we have here inscribed on this, that people could come, MPs could come, leader of opposition, even Prime Minister could come to Central Hall, because they use Central Hall. They used to use Central Hall now to go from one house to another house. Mr. Sahu is very familiar with the geographical dimensions of the old parliament building, but slowly things which in media we thought will never happen, happened. Like people said, who can abolish Article 370? Nobody can. It has been abolished. So in Parliament we had committee system, and even before independence, like Sangeeta was talking about functioning of parliamentary committee systems. So we had a media advisory committee in Lok Sabha, which used to advise the speaker. The speaker did not have the privilege to admit anyone to media gallery of Lok Sabha, which had 120 seats. And on budget day, it was totally full. And we used to think that it's going to collapse. But that committee was headed by a senior journalist. I was vice chairman of Lok Sabha Media Advisory Committee. We had 26, 27 journalists from print media, from electronic media, and we will scrutinize the applications with certain number of years who has got PIB accreditation, how many years you have covered parliament. So based on that and on the circulation of the newspaper or on the subscribers of the news agencies like PTI and UNI, which are a trust, we used to admit those number of correspondents to media gallery. But that media advisory committee, like Sangeeta said, Deputy Speaker's office is not occupied. So that media advisory committee is dysfunctional. Now the last media advisory committee chairman was Mr. Prakash Kamath, very senior journalist from Maharashtra. After that, it has not been constituted. The similar case was in Rajya Sabha, where the vice president, who is chairman of Rajya Sabha, will never, hanker after some journalist that he should be admitted to media gallery. So the officers of Lok Sabha Secretariat and Rajya Sabha Secretariat, they they took that cover that look, so even the MP's recommendations we used to turn down because so and so journalist has not fulfilled this criteria. And for the first time, when Mr. Somnath Chatterjee was speaker, we introduced a system of having a orientation program for journalists because they didn't know what are the privileges of parliament, how it should be covered, what is the committee system. So even some journalists, the journalists have very big inflated egos. They took umbrage to that proposal, but we carried on with that, and we invited parliamentarians, senior parliamentarians, because you need to know what is 0 hours, what is question hour, how it should be. In Rajya Sabha, we saw that practice of shifting of 0 hour to down to the last in the list of business. So now I have not seen the new parliament building because many senior journalists in protest against non-renewal of their central hall passes, they have said no to visiting new parliament house. There is a strict control on the flow of information. And if Sangeeta has seen the new parliament building, what the officers have of Lok Sabha Secretary told me, because the journalist cannot and an MP cannot enter from one place to another place. There is a space for you to wait for MPs, not like old Parliament House where in Central Hall you could even corner the leader of opposition or the Prime Minister. And for the
What
first
about
time,
that cage where they put journalists in that box?
I also saw on the TV, they said because these camera persons, they used to go to the MP who is coming out and to take a bite. Because these days, print media is on the back burner. So everyone wants to have a visual, visual appeal is very much there on YouTube channels, on TV channels. So they will give the bites. And for the first time, that system was put in place in a very systematic way by the speaker from Andhra Pradesh when Bal Yogi. And in front of gate number 4, we had an enclosure where MPs, ministers, they will stop. There were mics. You could give your bite and go. So you don't have to run after them. Please give us a bite. Please give us a bite. So that is the job of the electronic, TV channels. But for the first time, another thing, a paramilitary force is guarding Parliament security. Parliament Security Service is nowhere in the picture. CISF is after that. Those boys and girls, they jumped from in the new Parliament building in the gallery. So this has never happened in. I don't think it is in practice in anywhere in Parliament in any part of the world. Each and every parliament has its own security system, and these CISF guys, the constables, inspectors, sub-inspectors, DYSPs, SPs, they don't recognize MPs. There have been 2 protest letters to the speaker. But just imagine, paramilitary force guarding Parliament House. So the MPs have taken objection to that. When they are visiting the Parliament House, the security does not recognize them. And it's a privilege of an elected representative of the people to walk into any place. MPs could go and meet Prime Minister just by telephoning his PS or anybody. Prime Minister has an office, leader of opposition has an office, Home Minister has an office, Defense Minister has an office. So all these conventions have been thrown out of the window. So Sangeeta talked about this. So I thought this is an observation which.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Pick the mic, please.
Hi, I'm Sharbani. I'm a social and education policy researcher. And so I'll just lay out 5 points. And I'll, it's impossible because we are seeing a rapidly kind of evolving politics. So obviously there is rapidly evolving observations as well, right? And Ajay, I will cite from some of your works, right? And then I'll tie it with Sangeeta's point. And I'd like you to kind of elaborate on these 5 points. So first, you said that what looks from the top as authoritarian is actually from the bottom up. It seems like for the people, it's authoritative, right? And decisive. However, like earlier, just a few months back or something in one of your articles, you had mentioned that the confluence of religion and market are not antithetical to authoritarian governance that we see. This was, I think, in one of your NewsClick articles. NewsClick, yeah. And then the third point is that, you mentioned that pulling back market-oriented voluntarism with structural welfarism. And I think that is a very important point. Structural welfarism is very, very important. Now, what we are seeing as, things have come up, that basically what we are observing is that there is competitive welfarism, right? Many have talked about, from Yamini Iyer to Ratin Roy or whatever. So they've all criticized this idea of competitive welfarism, where, as you mentioned, Karnataka has upped the ante. Bengal started it. And then, of course, we have from Lakshmi Bhandar to Griha Lakshmi, and all the Lakshmis in the world are there now, right? Yes. And so, so there are these, so what we are seeing right now is that both central and the state governments are in this game of competitive welfarism, right, with respect to cash transfers and other stuff. And I think the Congress manifesto also had Nyaya Patra, right? So, so yes, there is no difference as such in terms of social policies and as well as popular perception. Yet, as Sangeeta said, and as many other people are saying, look, there are certain basic institutional changes that we are seeing. These are fundamental changes, changing the structure, the fabric of our democracy, and including the silencing of the opposition. Now, how do we kind of reconcile this issue that, on the one hand, there is a fundamental institutional change, and at the same time, there is a similarity in social policy and popular perception, right? So there is this kind of gap that, and whether China could be a model. Again, China is always like, oh my God, that's an authoritarian government. And no, we pride ourselves in the fact that we are a democracy, right? However, I mean, lately, what I'm seeing a lot of literature coming up on, how China has actually, even with its highly central authoritarian government, has a much more decentralized governance structure compared to India, which is extremely over-centralized, even with our democracy. So that is what I would want you to kind of, talk about.
Rather than questions. I think, and I would focus on Ajay's, because he's always very provocative, and I rise to the bait, always. You focused, I think, on the changes that have occurred in the social sphere and the post-neoliberal consensus. I think both are very important, but bring in a third element, which is the political context. Because all the stunning observations you got as a follow-up to elections. I think if you were to go a year after, observations would be different. Similarly, I think the same schemes which didn't seem to make a difference, or their performance didn't make a difference this time in Haryana, did make a difference in the way people chose to vote in the general election, national election. So I think that context in which we are talking, you get these stunning observations. They're important to discuss, but I think we need to hold back, because otherwise we are falling in the same trap which you accuse the psephologists of. That is, you make the moment of election and the outcome of election the basis of studying and understanding what is happening in the political. So I think that's my one first cautionary thing. The second thing is, and I think there are some, and Shabani has pointed out from your previous writing, and she's done a close reading, and I am too old for that. So, but I'm just going to focus on what you said. And I think you have to take cognizance of implicit contrariness in your statements, okay? Because you were very focused on facts, okay? You said that social composition does not matter too much, okay? But you also said that a year before election, BJP changed the chief minister and brought in somebody who's an OBC. So obviously, there is a symbolic difference. And I think we should not be asking just the question, what did they do in the sphere of education and health, etc. We need also to see the symbolic value of this social composition, which I think you do note, but I think sometimes in order to stun and shock, which is necessary in order to jolt us from our lethargy, one tends to, and I want to be a voice of a little caution here. The third element is that I think wherever popular regimes have, populist, not popular, populist regimes have come in, there has been this element, recurring argument, that liberals, in our case, they will say liberal and secularists, have got it wrong. They're out of touch with the pulse of the people. And I think this is a recurrent statement everywhere, all over the world, and I don't know what to make of it. Because it assumes that all that liberals are wanting is that people should vote for some regimen of human rights as the threshold on the basis of which they should judge candidates. While I think a lot of liberal secular politics is also about understanding, as you said, social interests, group interests. And people do take that into account. And interests, if we are going to say, the way people vote at a certain time, these certain beliefs, which are also circulated and mass produced in the current time due to technology, tend to last for a little while, but they're also open to change. So we can't assume that these beliefs and perceptions are static and firm and are likely to continue. So I think if you factor in this, we might then be looking for alternative sets of explanations for the same phenomena that you have actually observed and said, well, protest movements never translated into electoral results, okay, successes. This is a long-standing issue, and we need to ask many questions about the way electoral politics actually works. But that doesn't necessarily imply that the protests have no value or that they are just the monopoly of the elite or the dominant groups, because you could also have a fact check of who all were sitting and what the social composition of all that was. So I'm just saying that I think in all these elements, if we take this contextual element into account, it would moderate. And I think instead of assuming, and especially when it comes to elections, that there are static beliefs and perceptions which continuously reproduce and reproduce certain results, I think doesn't hold true. And that is why you have these kind of changes and shifts that do occur. Lastly, sorry, I've taken too long, but lastly, I think you wanted to emphasize the social and the economic, and I understand that. But I think it is time now to link it with the institutional. And one suggestion that I would have here is the following, that we can think in terms of why are people ready to see what you think authoritative as authoritarian as authoritative and decisive, is because, let's say, the way the party system itself, forget other institutional structures, has been centralized. So the greater the centralization, the greater the hold and ability to yield electoral success, gives people the impression that this is very decisive and authoritative. And I think we can therefore link the way institutions have been functioning for a while and the trajectory they are on to have yielded a certain kind of social perception, which sometimes comes to rules, but sometimes it doesn't. So I'm not that pessimistic.
Now, just how there's a sow here and you, madam, that's all. We'll close then after that, okay? So now I just wanted to add that one line to what Lupit said. You know, you said the protests are always of the rich and the elite. Now, what about Shaheen Bagh? Now that was not elitist and that was not the rich, you know. I mean, just a side, but I just wanted to add that. Now we'll put the Sahu. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm S.N. Sahu. No, you see the Haryana thing, you referred to. I mean, while there is a lot of truth in what you said, but the Congress strategy was so faulty. See, for instance, insiders, they told me, it was one particular high official within the Congress who Huda joined hands with him. And he said, you allow me 70, or 70 odd seats to whatever 70 odd seats or maybe less than 70, complete domination. Okay, so, this kind of strategy is a absolutely, kind of a self goal. It resulted in a self goal. And then failure of the Congress to build coalitions with small parties. These are all pervasive, state after state. Okay, and then, so I think these are also the factors. All right, so the point is, if in 2014, I was in PMO. Of course, I left PMO in 2009. I was there for 6 years. I was seething with anger that there is absolutely no communication from the Prime Minister's office. I was telling in one meeting with Manmohan Singh, he wanted suggestions. I said, increasingly, why don't you invoke Gandhi and Nehru? Then they said, well, this is a great point, but never it was done. And then I was so much frustrated and exasperated when Prime Minister went to the press club, event in press club of Calcutta, and I was asked, don't bring Nehru and Gandhi in the speech of Prime Minister. I was instructed. I said, shall I bring Raja Rahman Roy? Yes, Raja Rahman Roy. If this is the attitude of the PMO, to bring in Raja Rahman Roy in Bengal and don't bring in Gandhi and Nehru in Bengal, then what else you will expect? See, Mr. K.R. Narayanan, I worked under him. He was keen to bring in Gandhi and Nehru in every speech. So then if Prime Minister of India, when he delivers a speech, he educates the nation. He just doesn't speak for a particular event. So that was a big failure. Then Anna Hazare movement, it created a false perception. So these are the things which they could not. See, I tell you, somebody came from US, a big communication expert, and Congress said, we don't want to meet him. They realized, they got the information that Modi is coming. They wanted to prevent it. We'll discuss it over cup of tea.
So my name is Usha Sood. I've been an academic in public law and constitutional law in England for 40 years and a practitioner in public law for over 50 years. So I wanted to add an analysis based on what I've been hearing and also to give you some sort of insight, I think, into what's wrong and how it may be that sometimes you could think of the salvation of Indian democracy. I want to make a point in the beginning to the lady who mentioned China. Please do not use China as a model for your for saving your democracy. China boasts the highest number of executions in the world. Their number of executions in a day is higher than the world's total. And perhaps we shouldn't go any further than that. There is no gain from really looking at China's human rights record. And the other thing I wanted to say was that in the UK, we've brought down 3 prime ministers in the last few years, and bringing down those prime ministers was purely through parliamentary democracy. And that was something that one has to attribute to 2 things. One is accountable executive and separation of powers being vested in a very, very powerful judiciary. So just to give you an illustration, post the Second World War, the judiciary, the highest court in the UK, struck down retrospective legislation that the executive had passed. It was going to benefit the government a great deal, but the judiciary struck it down. And they've never had a chance to repeat it, the government, never ever repeated the exercise. So a strong judiciary, I would say, is important. And also the conscience of the people can, I think, be I felt a lot as if you're saying the self-interest of people is dominating at the moment. I think people have to develop a sense of knowing that the Constitution is under attack. In the UK, even the ordinary uninformed man will fight to the death for their unwritten Constitution. They don't even have a written Constitution. So those are my points, very, very briefly, but I think I found it extremely interesting, and I am keeping an eye on what's going on here. Thank you.
So, Iyer Sahib, would you like to say something?
You want to defend Mahua? I hadn't intended to. But I must say, I found Ajay's analysis of what's gone wrong with the Congress very persuasive. We used to have a combination of thoughts. These related broadly to democracy, secularism, socialism, and non-alignment. And these covered all aspects of human life. Democracy got established really under the Congress aegis. But it was found that it had a lacuna in that it did not involve the participation of the people, because representation was at such a high level that I found, as an MP who fought 7 elections, that no one voted for me and no one voted against me. They were voting for who would be the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu and who would be the Prime Minister of India. They were not interested in the candidate, however much they knew the candidate. That showed that we needed to get down to the bottom. And to do this, Rajiv Gandhi thought up an elaborate amendment to the Constitution, which was eventually passed almost unanimously. I say almost unanimously because the Dravidian parties did not support it, saying that Panchayati Raj is a state subject and we cannot have central legislation on it. But almost unanimously, nothing has been done about it. And the first party to forget about Panchayati Raj is the Congress Party. Secondly, secularism. We knew what secularism was. The state has no religion. It treats all religions equally. It is not anti-religion, but it has no religion of its own. And therefore, a clear distinction is maintained between social prejudices based on religion and state action. Now, we seem to think that the important thing is to show the BJP and therefore the electorate that we too are Hindus. This expression, we too are Hindus, I was astonished to find that in a brilliant denunciation of Chief Justice Chandrachud, Dushyant Dave finds it necessary to say that he is a Hindu and believes in Lord Ram. What was the relevance of that? But that is the mentality that has seeped into the Congress Party. And there is, I think, more than half the Congress Party would really rather be BJP. And that's one of the reasons, if you're going to want a religious party, then you go to the genuine thing. Why go to an ersatz version of religious politics? The third thing is socialism. It's become a very bad word. ever since Manmohan Singh brought in GDP as the key indicator of human welfare. His argument that you can't distribute poverty, you have to distribute riches, and therefore we first have to make the riches, completely led to a complete abandonment of Indira Gandhi, whom I'm not a great admirer of. But Indira Gandhi got it right when she emphasized Garibi Hatao. That is the priority. Or when the Congress, under I think Sonia Gandhi, or was it Rajiv, said that Congress ka haath garib ke saath. This was changed at the beginning of this century, saying that people feel insulted if you call them poor. And so you say Congress ka haath Aam Aadmi ke saath. And then Aam Aadmi got stolen by the Aam Aadmi party. And so you were left with the Congress just congratulating itself. And as for non-alignment, the purpose of non-alignment was to render the Cold War obsolescent. In other words, non-alignment was designed to end non-alignment so that you didn't have to align yourself to either bloc. But the key was to have an independent foreign policy and to be able to take an interest in international affairs by expressing whatever your view is, however maverick it might sound. That was what non-alignment was about. Non-alignment was a word that had a certain resonance in its day and age, but is perhaps a word that does not have a resonance now. But that doesn't mean that the essential quality of expressing your domestic sovereignty in your external relations has ceased to have any meaning. That is what we should be doing. But what do we do? We've now started abstaining on any resolution relating to Israel. And has the Congress objected? As far as I can see, the Congress hasn't. So we don't know where we stand on anything. And how can people be expected to vote for a party that does not know where it stands? But, and here I agree with somebody else, our task must be to end the rule of these Satans who are subverting the whole message of the freedom movement, subverting the constitution, and bringing in values that Mahatma Gandhi had rejected, that the people of India had rejected. After all, Savarkar was expressed himself in 1923, and the RSS came into existence in 1925. But for till 2014, no Indian voted for them. It's only in 2014, after the Manmohan Singh government vacated governance in 2012, when both Manmohan and Sonia fell seriously ill, and they were not ready to make Pranab the prime minister. We ended up in a complete governance vacuum, which for me was symbolized by my coming home one day to see my wife with an absolutely stricken face looking at television. So I said, what's happened? And she said, no scam today. So that was the condition to which our democracy had been reduced. And the BJP, for all its packing the judiciary, has not been able to bring conviction in any of the allegations they made against the UPA 1 and the UPA 2. Telecom, Pavan Bansal, Ashwini Kumar, where are those charges? They've all gone through the air. And yet the Congress was not able to put up an effective defense. And who was the telecom minister? One of our brightest and best lawyers, Kapil Sibal. So if you have a party that is not able to defend itself and not able to be on the offensive, then it has to ally. And to ally, the Congress needs to learn to stoop to conquer. If we tell our allies, we can't ally with you unless you regard me as numero uno. And if you start saying that until you've accepted that I'm at least the first among equals, I won't join with you, or are so uncertain that until Rahul Gandhi is in India, they say we're going to go into the Haryana election in alliance with the AAP. Then Mr. Rahul Gandhi takes off for America. Why in America? And for 4 days. And when he's away for 4 days, the party hacks decide that they will not ally with the AAP. Had we done so, we'd have won. All our faults would have gone. Don't forget that the alliance got only 10 seats less in parliament than the BJP. But if we had accepted the invitation that Nitish Kumar extended to all of us to come to Patna in June last year, June 2023, and he had been given the place he wanted, and this arrogant lady, Mamata, had been appeased by giving her some position. We know that all these people are regional leaders. There's no way they can become national leaders. So why don't we pretend that we're giving you a boost? And then we can form an alliance which defeats the BJP, and all the horrible things that have been happening over the last 10 years will be brought to a stop. And then the Congress starts thinking along your lines, a social policy which includes a huge emphasis on education, a huge emphasis on healthcare, and a huge emphasis, you didn't mention employment, but I would like to add that, and a huge emphasis on your third point, the basic income. The basic income thing, the Congress was the one that said it in 2019. And in 2024, there was very little more about it. And between 2019 and 2024, who talked about the basic income? So we know what needs to be done, and we don't do it. I'm very glad you've spoken here, but I'd really much rather that you'd spoken in 24 Akbar Road, so that those who need to listen would have listened. I'm able to get away with it because, owing to the fact that I am the Ajay Gudavarthy of the Congress party, I'm completely sidelined, and I will not be given any position or post there. But that enables me to at least give my views in the IIC. Thank you very much.
Do you want to say anything? Both of you?
No,
Just quick one, because we have to close in 3 minutes.
Yes.
Only, I mean, the
Let
lot.
Sangeeta.
Yeah, sure.
No, okay.
No, go ahead.
No, I would just like to append to what Mr. Iyer said. And yes, this is like we saw the effect of, how if they're going to do something with the constitution, that fear. Okay. Now we need to take this whole to develop that and take forward that, why democracy is important, why parliamentary democracy is important, what is this, what decentralization is actually doing to the states, and bring it home to say why, Jharkhand elections are, in front of us. Look, the thousands of crores that the central government has not cleared. It's only because it is run by an opposition party. So how is it then that is affecting a common man's life? We need to be able to talk about that, bring it down to the basics. And also this whole disillusionment thing, it's bad governance. That's why there's disillusionment. And disillusionment में हम लोग बहुत आसानी से कह सकते हैं कि एक राजा का जरूरत है, you can take decisions. That's why the authoritarian is now being looked as decisive. So we should be able to break it down to the granular level, and I think we should be having those basic conversations, because if we don't have the institution, we'll not be able to come down to what you are talking about. Thank you.
I should also thank Maniji for those very instructive comments. One of the meetings with the Congress, I told them that when Congress loses the election, they know why they lose in fighting corruption. But the problem is when they win, they don't know why they won the election. They're clueless. They look very confused and they're shocked. So this, I think, is a crisis of a social vision that Congress has to overcome. And as you say, some of us have to, I think, keep battering the point, and hopefully it will get home at some point. And quickly to Gurpreet's point, you must all realize she was my supervisor, what a tough supervisor she was, how tough time I had doing my PhD. I could barely submit it because of this. So,
He's taking that forward. Eh?
forward. So I take your no caution seriously, and I am with that. That I absolutely understand what you're saying. That those caution in terms of immediacy and exigency of political exigencies have to be factored in. But as of now, I think this is a trend that we are visualizing, and how long this is going to say, what are going to be dynamics. The caution the other way around is, what if this is a long-term shift? As you're suggesting, if it's a very contextual thing, then we can obviously have a much lighter conversation. But what if this is a long-term thing? That's what Haryana looked to me like. The kind of language they were getting at, the kind of indifference to sexual harassment. This is something that in general, my surveys, I did not see people respond that way. So I think this internal subversion that BJP is doing in terms of a socio-psychological thing, I think that's the key point. And to your point in terms of judiciary should be strong, we are all with it. But the question is, where does it come from? None of us know where is this strong, conscientious bureaucracy and judiciary is going to come from. And to the first question she raised in terms of markets and authoritarianism, this is the kind of a qualification I make, is that the categories I employ, that if you ask me, is there authoritarianism in Indian democracy, I would have no hesitation in saying, yes, it is authoritarian. It is getting increasingly centralized. But that kind of invocation of categories without a social analysis sometimes refies existing process, which is what is Modi's game. That those of us sitting at IIC he's happy when you call him fascist. He's actually happy when you call him a fascist, because that refies his image of being a decisive leader, and he's being abused because he's somebody who's transformative. I think that's the notion of caution I'm continuously giving, that we have to see what if authoritarianism is perceived as being authoritative, how should we intervene? Without raising this question, if we simply offer a critique, then that may not work. And that's also my answer again to your question, that I'm all for social composition, diversity. I'm all for OBC reservation. I in fact call myself a reservation fundamentalist. But we should not run away with this eulogized idea that representation is going to bring big time change. That's not how it's working. People are, as Gurpreet suggested, people are looking for the importance of, but that is leading to repeated disappointments. And that disappointment will finally also feed into wholesome consent for authoritarian forms of government. And therefore, our discourse should also have that notion of critical engagement with question of representation. That's all. I'll stop.
I think we've had a good discussion, but listening to Mani, I thought that it has become a state of the Congress party in India instead of state of parliamentary democracy. Because somehow we think that if the Congress party is there, democracy is safe. But actually, what is happening today is the roots of it lie in the UPA. You see, they lie in the UPA. I mean, the Vajpayee could have fallen because of Shining India. I don't know, this combination of Manmohan Singh and Montague. Yeah? Montague used to come up like a jack in the box every time Congress comes. Montague is there. So anyway, that's what I'm just trying to say.
Not for nothing has Mr. Modi been calling India mother of all democracies. He knows that it is rooted somewhere there. That is what I was talking
But
about.
the thing which has, come out very clearly is that we are up against a kind of a disruptive intervention. it's wrecking from within. I mean, the entire systems which we have grown up with, at least which I think we have grown up with, have been distorted, have been demobilized, have been, put on the back burner, have been just finished, So, I mean, it's not.
Add on that note, a book that came out on Modi just before 24 election, the title was Creative Disruptor.
No, I don't know how can you be it's a contradiction in terms, but whatever. I mean, you can mark your book at Bhari Sons or something, but otherwise, I mean, whatever. But the point I'm making is that, you are, Mani mentioned these four things. Education is virtually being finished, all the universities, all the higher education institutions. I mean, you have to find out who your grandfather was to get a bloody lectureship. Was he associated with that 1925 organization or not? And then health, is being totally subverted, I mean, you have aims, you have some, and you have these max hospitals. There's no difference there. There's so much rush at those hospitals also. I mean, it's crazy, absolutely. And then employment, of course, there's, I mean, whatever. So what I'm just saying is, when we are critical, we must also talk of pushing whatever is left of the opposition to do something which can both mobilize and demobilize the present dispensation. Anyway, thank you very much. It's been a thoughtful evening. I hope IIC can continue with all this in this present environment. Thank you very much. I think Mahua has to be thanked. She could carry on because she was not present.